Hey there, welcome back to Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. It's been a while, I'm glad you're here. I've got some beds to revitalize, some gardens that have laid fallow for a little while, and I want to show you how the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's go. Well, I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to teach you much on this video, but I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do in my garden to kind of revitalize the beds that have laid fallow for a couple months now and get them ready to actually use. It's been a bit of time since I've been out here really with time to work the garden, so we got a mess to clean up. Right back here I have 3 raised beds. At this point in their life they are not quite raised beds. What I'm trying to do is bring up soil from below the original grade, because I've got some clay down there, and that clay has really good mineralization, and that's what I want to slowly work into my garden. I want the organic matter to work down into that clay and break it up, and every now and then I'll till and bring some of that clay up. So that's what I've been working on. Mineralization is what makes your food really healthy and taste better. And if you just grow in a raised bed mixture that's mostly organic, you're going to have to add that mineralization to your soil by way of amendments. Well, I'm going to take advantage of my natural soil here. So these raised beds are actually not quite totally raised. They're kind of half and half. Right now they're kind of ugly. Let's go look. If you follow my channel at all, you know that these 3 raised beds are my main beds. And these are 3 beds in different states of revitalization or revival. These beds have laid fallow for about 3 months, and during that 3 months, August, September, and part of October, that's the weedy season here. That's when the weeds grow the most, as you can see over there. So this bed is ready to plant. I have flame weeded, and I have tilled. I've taken this little tiller and just loosened up all that soil. Now, you shouldn't be a slave to a system. There are those who practice no-till gardening. That's a perfectly valid and good method. I try to not till most of the time. You can see my dog has tracked through here already. I try not to till most of the time, just adding organic material to the top. But sometimes tilling is appropriate. And in this circumstance, I'll tell you what happens. Look over there at that 3rd bed, how weedy that is. That is super weedy. And it got that way because I didn't mulch. I had sweet potatoes climbing all over the place. And among the sweet potatoes grew up all the weeds. This middle bed here is almost ready to till. I flame weeded this bed, knocking out the majority of the weeds. It almost looked like that one over there. But this one needs to be flame weeded again just so I can knock down some of that nud sedge and some of those weeds there. Then I'll go ahead and till that up. And what that'll do is take all those roots of those weeds, break them up, and till them into the top 6 inches of the soil. Loosen up this soil. Tilling, if you rely on tilling too much, you can build yourself a hard pan down beneath where the tiller reaches. And that's not ideal, but what I want to do is break up these roots. And what that'll do is, as the winter garden is put in, those roots will have an opportunity to break down a bit. Now the nut sedge nuts will survive and they'll come back next year, but most of those rhizomes and running and spreading roots of these nut sedges, those won't survive. They will become organic material in the soil. The nuts will, but the good news about these kinds of weeds is they don't grow well in the spring. So my winter garden and my spring garden should be relatively weed-free. But the problem with a weedy garden is as these weeds drop seeds in the soil, there's a seed bank in here. That's what it's called. The seeds are down in the soil, and some of them get tilled down deep, and they just sit there, and they just wait until such a time as, well, you till them up near the surface, and they'll sprout again. But if you mulch heavily, and if you use ground covers, you can suppress those weeds. If you don't mulch, you have to come out, and as your seedlings are coming up and you see little sprouts like that, you just weed by hand and stay on top of it. So you can do multiple methods of gardening that don't latch you on to any particular one method. Don't be a slave to a method. You can try all different kinds of things in your garden, see what works best for you. With the weather I have here and the kind of gardening that I do, tilling every now and then and breaking up all those roots is a valid and workable method for me. So that's what we're going to do, get these garden beds whipped into shape. My third bed is a situation where you want to get most of the organic material out, because if you flame weed something like this, you're going to have a big fire on your hands. Although I did flame weed a little bit in here, and yeah, it wasn't too bad. The sweet potatoes, they're not producing big tubers this year because I haven't been able to garden very much this year. I haven't been able to trim those sweet potato vines up, and well, sometimes that's what you need to do to get tubers underground. Let me show you what I've got over here in terms of sweet potatoes. I have this raised bed over here. I've got sweet potato vines growing in them, and I let them sprawl. Ideally, you would want to come and trim up a lot of this vine, and you can eat those leaves. They're very delicious, but you could trim it up. Right now, this sweet potato plants, all these sweet potatoes, are putting their efforts into growing vines and flowers. What we want the sweet potatoes to do is put their effort into growing tubers. If you come and you trim this out and you don't let these vines get super huge, the sweet potatoes will develop more of what we're after down here in the soil. And I've dug around here with my hands, and I haven't found very many large tubers. There's a few down in there, but because I wasn't able to stay on top of it this year and keep those vines trimmed back, I'm not going to have very many tubers down in there. Now that we've tilled, this soil is very loose and very soft, and I can direct sow my seeds into this soil. And what I'm going to do is grow some carrots, some brassicas, and I'm gonna try to get this winter garden really going with all the crops that we like to grow in the winter. The benefit of Zone 9A on the Texas coast is that you can grow through the winter if you pick the right crops. Carrots, they handle our freezes here just fine. We love carrots. We always get a good crop of carrots. I grew carrots here last year, so I'm going to move down to the other end of the garden bed and grow my carrots down that side. And yeah, so it's time to get growing here. I'm behind schedule, but the benefit is that it stays warm enough through our winter that I can be a little bit late. Ideally, in Zone 9A here on the Texas coast, you'd like to get your plants into the ground and your seeds sown about the first week of October. That's how it's worked out for me. But if you look at planting charts, any time in October will work for you if you want to grow a winter garden. I'm going to grow some carrots, like I said. I'm going to grow some bok choy and some cabbages. I have some starts that I'm going to put in my other bed over there, and we're going to mulch heavily so we don't get weeds over there. Now, I can't mulch my carrots because I'm going to broadcast sow them the way Danny at Deep South Homestead does. I'm going to try his method this year and see if that'll work for me. The method I usually use is to put them in rows, and I've got videos on how to plant carrots that way. It's worked for me. I've never had to use any kind of a cover sheet or cardboard or wood to get them to come up and sprout. Just keep them moist and they'll come up for you. But I might try Danny's method this year. We'll do it down there on the other end of this bed. This soil is nice and ready for carrots, and well, I love some carrots. See how this tiller really chops through these roots, and yeah, that's organic matter for the soil, and it leaves a real nice loose medium to plant in. So every now and then I think it's okay to till. In fact, this is getting down 4 inches, that's all. So everything that's beneath that is pretty much being left alone, and that's where I have a lot of mineralization, a lot of clay down in there, that as my garden bed has decreased in volume, as the soil is used up by the plants, all that organic material, I'm getting closer to my clay layer. And well, that can be a good thing, especially if you loosen that clay with amending your soil with like green sand, which is gypsum. What that does is get down there and there's a chemical reaction with the gypsum and the agents in the chemistry of the clay that bond the clay particles to the silt particles and or the minerals together. And that really breaks it up. It's called flocculation. And if you put gypsum in your soil, if you've got heavy clay soil, over time that'll help loosen that clay up and make some of that mineral content available to your plants. So yeah, we're revitalizing our garden here, getting it ready. I can plant right in here now and mulch heavily if I want. Two ideas about mulching or not mulching. If you're going to be in your garden tending the garden and doing that on a regular basis, you could just leave bare soil if you want and come through and use a hoe or a stirrup hoe and weed in between your rows. But in that case, you ought to plant rows so that you can weed in between them. If you stay on top of that, you can get away with a bare soil garden. It's far better to mulch though, because you'll keep moisture in. It will suppress the weed growth, and you can come in and just hand weed those weeds that pop up through your mulch. A good 3-inch layer of mulch is good. The problem with that is you can't mulch where you've sown your seeds. So I'm going to sow my seeds in here and wait until I see where they come up. And when I see them come up, then I'll come back and put mulch on my garden around those. Now, if you have transplants and you put them in, you can mulch right away. I do have transplants. Some of them will be going in this garden. And I may cover this bed with a weed cloth and plant right through that in holes. I've done that in the past, worked great. So, well, there we go. We're getting all these weeds out of here, just leaving these dead roots behind. And these dead roots like that are organic material for your soil. So, yeah, I'm happy with my progress today. Well, as you can see, I did choose to go ahead and flame weed my my third bed here, and it looks a whole lot better. Now I can come back and till all this ash into the soil. That's actually good for the soil. Looks a whole lot better, man. I didn't have to do any of that by hand. All the roots remain down below, but they'll die off because the upper part of the plant's not supporting them anymore. And as I chop them up and stir them in the soil, even some of those tougher roots that might pop back, well, they'll be so stressed down there, they'll die off. Now, I will have weeds come up in the summer again, especially that nutsedge, like I've mentioned. That stuff grows no matter what. It's almost impossible to get rid of. But for now, all I got to do is till this. I don't even have to till it if I didn't want to. But I'm going to till it and get this ready for planting. And once again, I might cover this with a weed cloth for the winter and plant in holes. But can't do that where I have to sow my seeds directly, but we'll see. I am so behind, I haven't planned out my winter garden yet. But I'm getting it ready. I'm revitalizing. Now, there's one more thing we have to do. There's one more thing that I like to do. I like to amend my garden after each growing season. I like to put on a layer of compost, just sheet a layer of compost over the entire garden bed, and just let it sit on top and plant right into that. I also like to come in with a all-purpose organic fertilizer, a slow-release fertilizer like Dr. Earth's. I like Dr. Earth's. I come in with some azomite sometimes, and I come in with a sprinkling of green sand or gypsum all over my soil to, again, work down and flocculate that clay and loosen it up a bit down below. And that seems to work for me. You could just use compost if you want. You want a good layer of it on there. This year I don't have a lot of compost. My compost pile is really, well, it's not in good shape right now. The boards are kind of rotten out. I need to rebuild it. I do have some compost, but I'm going to wait till the spring to put that in. There's plenty of nutrition in that soil. That soil has been treated well for many years now, and it's always given me a good harvest. So to revitalize a neglected garden, again, you want to get the majority of the organic matter off. Pull the weeds, pull the big weeds, pull the dead plants. You want to get those, the remainder of those weeds somehow either manually removed. That's too much work, man. Burn them down, get you a flame weeder, burn them to the ground. And then you can come in and turn that soil, or take a fork and just loosen that soil. You can plant right into that if you want to. And then the third step is to amend your bed with some sort of fertilizer, compost, and the things that you need. It pays to get a soil test, find out what you're lacking in your soil. Many times people are lacking mineralization, especially if you've been using some of the organic growing methods that only use organic material like compost and mixes that are heavy in peat, like the square root, the square foot method. You know, you're not going to get a lot of mineralization in there unless you put it in there in the form of amendments. But yeah, that's what I'm doing here. That's how I'm doing it. We're going to plant some carrots soon. We're going to plant some other things out in the yard. I mean, out in the beds here that are starting to whip into shape. So I'm feeling better. It's been a rough season over here, y'all, and I haven't been able to stay on top of things. But we're starting to see the light on this garden and get it into shape, and we'll have a nice winter garden. I haven't given a general update in a while, but while we're looking around, take a look at this. This is my southern cherry, a Barbados cherry. I got it this year in the spring, and it's really taken off. It really likes this soil that I've put it in, and that's a nice healthy tree. Hope to get some fruit off of it. Here's my Mexican sunflower. This is Tithonia diversifolia. I got these from Daisy the Goods Etsy shop, and I showed you how to start these in soil. Well, here's one of them that's doing well. I've transplanted this yesterday, so it's looking a little shocked, but it will recover. I'm going to grow this for chop and drop. This is a good green manure. You can see something already likes it and has been eating on it. So yeah, there's my Mexican sunflower. Phoebe is doing well, although we fear she's blown out her other leg now. She's kind of limping around. We'll see. Hey, you finding any critters? Where's the critter? Huh? Any critters? I shouldn't be saying that because then she'll go running on that gimpy back leg. Check it out. Lucy, survivor of the Great Freeze, starting to put on some lemons, and they're starting to ripen up. That's encouraging. Not a whole lot of lemons on Lucy this year. I think most of this foliage up here is non-bearing. I'll have to trim that out. But yeah, Lucy gives us so many lemons. We don't know what to do with them all. And it's encouraging to see some ripening. It's about that time of the year. If you've been around my channel a very long time, you remember that I had a goji berry plant right here by this raised bed here. And this goji berry was in a pot, and the roots went way down into the ground. I had to cut that pot away and remove that goji berry. It was kind of diseased, but look at this, they're coming up on their own. So I'll try to weed whack around these. I'd like to have some goji berries, but that first plant just didn't thrive. Also, look at this. This was put in a couple years ago as a hugelkultur bed, and it was full all the way to the top. And you can see how it has dropped down about 8 inches now. All that's down there has rotted into soil and dropped this level a bit. So what I think we're going to do, I've got several hugelkultur projects, little ones like this, but this one has the most wood in the bottom. I think we're going to do some garden archaeology in the upcoming future and the not too far future, and we're going to look and see what happened to that wood down there. This bed where my okra was planted is about 2.5 to 3 years old. It was also a hugelkultur bed, but it was mainly sticks, the biggest of which were maybe 2 inches in diameter. So a lot of rot goes on down there, and you can see this bed has dropped. I've already topped this bed off once before I planted garlic last year. So there's a lot of decomposition going on down there, and that's what's supposed to happen. By the way, these gigantic okra leaves make great chop and drop. Hey, thanks for joining me on Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Just a little update. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be trying to increase our video output production here as we get going in earnest with our winter garden, and I hope you'll join us. Hey, happy gardening to you. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.